and it was that same year that they met for the first time since their last encounter in 2017. Adesanya was about to have his fifth fight in the UFC. His opponent would be his idol, Anderson Silva. The Spider was almost 44 years old and far from his prime. Knowing he was at a disadvantage, Silva decided to bring to his camp the last man to defeat Adesanya, the Glory champion, Alex Pereira. Adesanya beat Silva by unanimous decision in the fight that was awarded Fight of the Night. After this victory, Last Stylebender's next fight would be for the interim belt against Kelvin Gastelum. After 5 rounds of war, in one of the most exciting fights of the year, Izzy emerged victorious and defeated Gastelum by unanimous decision, becoming the new interim middleweight champion. He then faced Robert Whittaker in a title unification bout on October 2019, headlining UFC 243 for UFC Middleweight Championship. The main event of UFC 243 between Whittaker and Adesanya went down in history as the biggest crowd in UFC history, with 57,127 people in attendance at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, Australia. After a knockdown in last second of the first round, Adesanya won the fight via knockout in the second round. This win earned him his 4th Performance of the Night award. He became the first fighter to defeat Whittaker in the UFC middleweight division. His popularity exploded after this win. He was slowly becoming one of the most well-known fighters in the world. In the following year in 2020 he defended the belt twice, once against Romero at the beginning of the year by unanimous decision, and another against Paulo Costa, when Izzy made Costa look like an amateur and easily knocked him out in the second round. He was undefeated in MMA, and the last time he lost was when he was competing in kickboxing, when he got brutally knocked out by Poatan. In 2020, Pereira's knockout over Izzy started to go viral on the internet. More people became aware of the existence of this fight, and wanted the Brazilian to arrive in the UFC to offer a different challenge to Izzy, who was gradually becoming one of the most dominant champions in the UFC. In addition to seeing the guy he had already defeated twice becoming an MMA star and one of the highest paid fighters in the UFC, what motivated Pereira a lot was this interview that the Nigerian gave in that exact same year of 2020.
At the end of the day, no one knows who the he is. When I'm world champion, when I'm a legend, he's gonna be at some pub talking some shit about I beat that guy one time.
Knowing that his popularity was increasing a lot with that KO, in 2020, the first double champion in Glory history, was also aiming to move to MMA. The previous year in 2019, Pereira had 3 title fights across 2 different divisions. He won all of them by knockout and became the first double champion in Glory history. At that moment he was already a kickboxing legend. Before focusing only on MMA, he had already fought in MMA 3 times. His MMA record at the time was 2 wins and 1 loss. In the second half of 2020 he signed with the LFA. Many fighters leave the LFA straight to the UFC. If Pereira had an outstanding performance in his LFA debut, the UFC could sign him right away. Prior to this fight, the last time he fought in MMA had been 4 years earlier in 2016. And after 4 years without fighting MMA, he would make his LFA debut on November 20, 2020. In his debut he brutally knocked out his opponent in the first round. This victory made a noise in the fighting world. The UFC quickly hired him. The timing was the best possible, since Adesanya was running over everyone. Some contenders had even been defeated by the Nigerian more than once. At that time Alex already was a double champion in Glory kickboxing, being the middleweight champion and interim light heavyweight champion, since at the time the linear light heavyweight champion, the Russian Artem Bakadov, was injured and could not fight. Poatan was not satisfied in being linear champion of one division. He also wanted the linear light heavyweight belt, and in January 2021, he defeated Artem Bakadov and became the first fighter to be lineal champion of 2 different divisions in Glory. Before moving fully to UFC, he had one more commitment in kickboxing, which was the rematch against Bakadov in September of that same year for the Glory Light Heavyweight Championship. Pereira lost the rematch. Two months later he finally made his UFC debut at UFC 268, where he brutally knocked out his opponent in the second round, winning the Performance of the Night award. Knowing that Poatan had great potential to be a UFC star, the UFC promoted him a lot, as he is a kickboxing legend, has a very exciting fighting style to watch and has a history with Adesanya. 4 months after his debut in the biggest MMA event, he was expected to face the dangerous striker Bruno Silva, who had won 7 consecutive fights by knockout. Pereira defeated Silva by unanimous decision. For his third UFC fight he was expected